today, the president's executive order came down on saving college sports. My question to you, Amanda, on this executive order and this, what happens in 2028 if the Republicans aren't in power then and this stuff hasn't gotten implemented in any way and the SCORE Act doesn't go through? Then it's just a piece of paper, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the tricky thing about executive orders, right? They are a lot less concrete, for lack of a better term, than actual legislation that's passed in Congress. The executive order that Trump just signed today, it definitely is a supplement and a complement to the SCORE Act. It doesn't contradict the SCORE Act really at all in any meaningful way. The U.S. House representatives who are spearheading the SCORE Act came out with a statement saying that they're in favor of it, and they believe it complements their legislation. But that's exactly what it is. It's a signal. To me, it's a signal that Trump is saying, I'm behind this Republican effort to grant the NCAA its wish list. The actual executive order itself doesn't have a lot of teeth for the things that it actually wants to do. And, there are some things about banning third-party pay-for-play payments, but ultimately it sort of just directs different agencies to look into various aspects of college sports. And that's sort of the name of the game with executive orders.
One of those agencies is the Department of Education, Amanda, one that they seek to eliminate. So that's another thing that I'm kind of confused about.
Yeah, and you know what? I was equally as confused about that when I covered the executive order that banned transgender athletes from competing in women's sports. Because regardless of what you think about any of these issues, the mechanism, well, at least with that executive order, President Trump was actually trying to implement a ban that would hold up in court. And the way that he was going to do so was through the Department of Education, which, as you said, is an agency that he ultimately, at least the national office of it, he hopes to sunset. The Department of Education is a little bit less involved in this executive order. I believe it's supposed to commission a study about, just like the health of women's sports and Olympic sports. But, some of the more meaty things are about athlete compensation, which isn't exactly the Department of Education's purview. Although I guess you could say it could be. I don't know. I'm talking myself around in circles.
Yeah, I know a lot of it's, commerce and NLRB and all those things. But that's almost too boring to get into. But just 2 days ago, the House settlement had to morph once again back to basically what it was before anyway. So what's the point of the CSC if the House settlement can keep changing, and how do they actually build a structure when they've kind of already whiffed on the biggest thing that they wanted to do?
Well, I think what's interesting about this post-House settlement structure that a lot of folks didn't really understand or even know is that in the actual settlement document, there are stipulations that give the plaintiff counsel the ability to, bring these concerns to oversee the implementation of the House settlement over the next 10 years. So yeah, the College Sports Commission is going to be, enforcing the House settlement. But if the College Sports Commission does something that the House plaintiff attorneys deem to be, illegal or not in the spirit of the settlement, then they can, they can call a foul and they can bring all the athletes back, or all the lawyers back to the negotiating table. And that's exactly what they did with this guidance from 2 weeks ago about whether or not collectives are going to be able to offer deals that are going to be accepted through NIL Go. So, we're talking about who is running college sports, right? It's the power conferences, it's the College Sports Commission, it's, the NCAA to a lesser extent. But ultimately, it's also the House plaintiff attorneys, because in the agreement, it says that they, for the next 10 years, get to watch how these rules are implemented and challenge and force all of the attorneys for the conferences to come back to the negotiating table every time they do something that the plaintiff attorneys disagree with.
Yeah, I wondered how long it would take for that fair market value thing to come back and bite them, because
Yeah.
like, again, they didn't really give a definition of it. Every coach that we've talked to, every coach that I've read people have talked to, they were like, yeah, okay, great. Well, what is that? And they didn't give a definition for it. They just kind of threw it out there. And then Deloitte's like, we've got this system that the computer will tell you what fair market value is. And I just kind of had a feeling that Jeffrey Kessler was like, no, it won't.
Well, I mean, look, I think there is a world in which the House plaintiff attorneys would be okay with NIL Go functioning, and accepting, approving, and denying deals if a component of that wasn't denying an entire type of deal from NIL collectives. That was never supposed to be what the House settlement was going to do. The House settlement, maybe the defendant conferences wanted it to eliminate collectives, but in my reading of it and talking to collectives all over the country, that wasn't their reading of it either. They understood they needed to change some of their operations. You have to offer like an autograph signing, or you have to offer social media, or you have to offer something in exchange for money as a player, right? Like, you can't just take the money. You have to offer an NIL activity. But no one ever, or at least I didn't think that meant that if a collective couldn't offer it at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and that's what the CSE was trying to say, and that's just not what the plaintiff lawyers thought was going to be the case.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, you just mentioned it. There's kind of an easy way around it, though. If you just say, let's just use, Nico Amaliava at UCLA and his new agreement that he has there. He has to do 3 autograph signings by the time he leaves. Like, he can knock that off on Memorial Day weekend and call it a day. Like, that's all he has to do. So that's why it was just weird to me that they would even try to shoehorn something like that in there and expect not to get pushback on it. That's where I think all this gets weird, is the NCAA keeps trying to do these things and they keep losing, instead of like looking ahead going, okay, how do we make sure that this is the last time that we really have to talk to these guys for 10 years?
Right. Totally. Although I will say what's super interesting is the College Sports Commission is the power conferences. It's not the NCAA.
Yeah.
So the NCAA lawyers were involved in these discussions. But what I find so fascinating, and I'm literally sitting here at Big Ten Media Days across from the room where Commissioner Petitti may or may not be at this exact moment. I spoke with him yesterday. The power conferences are the ones who are trying to set these restrictions now, which I can't figure out for the life of me. I just don't understand why they have taken on the NCAA's ideology in that sense. It's very strange. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't think it makes sense to a lot of their constituents either.
You mentioned Tony Petitti. You talked to him yesterday. One of the things was about private equity, and Brett Yormark kind of told everybody that they've put it on pause for right now, that they're looking for more traditional avenues of revenue. And he had said it had to be bespoke to the Big 12. And so anything that happened would have to be specific. It was more capital than equity, so to speak. What does Tony Petitti say about it for a league that doesn't really need it, but if there's money there, they're going to take it?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to me because he seemed more interested in it than the other power conference commissioners did, or at least, I mean, look, a conference commissioner, like, I know Brett Yormark was interested in private equity, but ultimately he has to do what his university presidents want him to do, and the university presidents directed him to sort of give up on it for now. Like, they weren't interested. But the Big Ten is still having these conversations. Tony Petitti said that nothing is crystallized. It's going to be a long way away if they do jump into the private capital, private equity game, but he's still having these conversations, and it is something that they're still exploring. And when I sort of said, okay, so there aren't really like active conversations right now, Like, but it's something you'd be interested in. He said, no, I don't want to downplay. Like there are conversations. And I just found that really striking, given that, Greg Sankey and Jim Phillips have also, in addition to your mark, said that they've explored it, but ultimately like don't really see a role for private equity at the conference level at this point.
He's the most different of the four. Like they're kind of unique, but he's a little bit of the outlier. He has spent this time doubling down on the AQ format as well. Do you believe that is political bluster to get the SEC to just go to the 9 games so then they can explain to their coaches like 5-11 is what everybody's doing, or is he a true believer in what he's come up with?
That's a really great question. And that's an interesting theory about the 9 games. Look, I'm not inside his head, so I can't really speak to like, it's like, I can't really speak to like the ultimate motivations there. But when I asked him about the CFP, I sort of said, look, like ultimately the decision lies with you and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, right? But if Greg doesn't budge on this, then your model is not going to be adopted. And the other commissioners aren't in favor of your model either. The coaches at the Big Ten Media Days were definitely in favor of Commissioner Petitti's model, just putting that out there. But ultimately, like the actual voting power lies with Petitti and Sankey. So I said, what is your like plan to convince Greg Sankey that this is the right way to go? And he didn't really have a plan. Like it was more just, about having these conversations. And, I didn't end up joking with him. Like, what? You're like, are you going to hire a lobbyist for Greg, to like sit outside of Greg Sankey's office? But I didn't say that, but I thought it, So I think, I'm not really sure. I think ultimately, look, when you negotiate, you ask for more than what you think you're going to get so that you can meet in the middle. So whatever meeting in the middle means for him, whether that means, being able to alter the selection committee, the way they operate, or, the 9 games for the SEC, like whatever he's really gunning for, like maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, he went so hard, like, this week, but he didn't say anything for a long time. And it just feels to me that it's not really like eventually they're going to get essentially what they want in a 5+11 anyway. And the SEC coaches have said like, okay, well, if we do 4-4, like we might only get 4. As we do 5-11, we'll probably get 6 on a normal year. And the Big Ten,
right,
probably 5 in a lot of years. So it just felt to me like it was more of a chess move than something he truly believes in, or he's just trying to sell more TV games to people because he is, after all, a TV executive.
Yeah, and I know that was floated. I can't substantiate that report. I think that's always true that, commissioners, especially at this level of college sports, they wouldn't be doing their job if they weren't trying to maximize television revenue. I don't think it's this great conspiracy that may have crossed his mind, that he may have talked to television executives about the potential upside of this new format in a 16-team playoff. And by the way, the 16-team playoff is going to yield more money anyway, so long as ESPN has agreed to pay for extra games. It's interesting because like with March Madness, with the women's tournament, I know for a fact that ESPN's agreement says that they won't pay for expansion. So just, you have to see what's in the agreement. But I don't think it's any great conspiracy that would be a factor. Everyone's trying to maximize a postseason for television revenue because that benefits everybody, no matter how many AQs they have.